I'm Jill Angelo, host of the G-Spot. I speak with the most forward-thinking experts in the medical and wellness industries, all in an effort to bring awareness to women's hormonal and vaginal health. When we feel fabulous in our bodies, we are more confident, we have healthier relationships, and we have better sex. Here's to a happy, healthy vagina. I'm here today with Lynette Sheppard, author of the book Becoming a Menopause Goddess and moderator of the Menopause Goddess blog and website. She and her team of goddesses decided to take on the lack of knowledge and awareness women generally have when heading into the big M. She's a former nurse manager and was the head of intensive care and coronary care units in Santa Rosa, California for about 10 years before deciding to go out on her own as a speaker, author, and expert on all things healing and health. The Menopause Goddess blog has been named a top menopause blog for the past 5 years by Healthline magazine. And we at the G-Spot count ourselves as one of the many benefactors of this blog. And so we're extremely excited to have Lynette with us today.
Absolutely my pleasure. I look forward to talking to your listeners and sharing what I've come to know over the past so many years of menopause.
Let's dive into this whole notion of lack of knowledge that exists for 40 and 50-year-old women as they head into menopause. There's 50 million women in the U.S. alone that are in menopause, and my stats show that number grows about 2 million every year. So if you were to look at it, the 2 million of us newbies on an annual basis have a lot coming at us with little to no information. You're carving a path for women all over the place in this age group. How did you come to find this lack of awareness associated with menopause when you started out with Menopause Goddess?
Well, honestly, it happened because as a nurse, I expected fully that menopause would be a simple, easy transition. Maybe I'd be hot once in a while, but no big deal. And how wonderful not to have to worry about whether I could wear white pants or a white skirt anymore. But what happened was so many weird symptoms and so much strangeness occurred that I began to look for information. And there wasn't much. There was one site, I think, called powersurge.com, and it was so confusing I couldn't really follow it or figure out where to get information. It was very chatty and nice, but it didn't have anything for me. And there was a couple of big books, but they were written by doctors, and they were so hard to tackle and so full of anatomy and physiology and stuff that even as a nurse I didn't want to read. What I wanted to know was what was happening to me normal? And if it was, what could I do about it? Because my entire life was turned upside down.
Do you mind sharing how it turned your life upside down?
Well, personally, first of all, the hot flashes were so overwhelming. It was like heart palpitations, intense heat. And they would last they weren't flashes, they lasted for 5-10 minutes, and they were hideous and literally interfered with daily living. They were dreadful. I thankfully did not have any of the emotional symptoms. I did not get depressed. I did get a little angry once in a while, but kind of like a cranky child when you're too hot, when you have the flu or something, you get irritable. And the other symptoms were just weird things like I got sick a lot. I had shingles for the first time. Everything was cattywampus and upside down, and it made no sense at all. There was vaginal dryness. The libido just said goodbye. So there were so many things that were so disconcerting. Oh, and my hair started falling out. So that was horrifying. And I'll have it all happen at once. I was like, either I have some terminal illness or this is menopause. And if this is menopause, why doesn't everybody talk about this? I talked to my own mother, and she said, oh, honey, I didn't really notice it. Well, that generation, unfortunately, was given hormone pills before they actually felt a symptom, I believe. So there was no way she would have felt it. Anyway, it was dramatic, and it was interfering with my life terribly.
What kind of was the first step? Like, it sounds like you talked to your mom, but was there a moment where you just said, I'm gonna take this on and start not only fact finding for myself, but publishing?
Absolutely, there was. My girlfriend, my best friend, Teresa, she started menopause around the same time as I did. And so we were talking on the phone one day, and I was like, do you think this is normal? Do you think we're normal? Do other women go through this? And we decided to have what we called a slumber party with a focus. We were going to invite some women to spend a weekend where we explored what was going on with us. So it would be women of a certain age and affliction. And we indeed did do that. We had all these ice-breaking exercises and stuff, which we obviously didn't need, because the minute the 15 women gathered, the floodgates opened. And clearly we were all going through dramatic, huge upheaval, and there was no place to vent that or to realize that we were not alone. So that became the impetus. We began to meet every year. We met for 14 years, every year, once a year, and kept in touch the rest of the time. But just to find out that we were not alone, that all of us had been sort of hit upside the head by menopause, was a huge relief. And the second part was beginning to realize that it would not last forever. The worst of it was going to be temporary. But we shared what we would call like kitchen table wisdom with one another, the things that worked for us or didn't. And each of us was different. Each of us had different symptoms. Each of us responded differently to different remedies. But coming together and being able to share that meant, okay, we're women, we're tough. We can get through anything if we know what to expect. But not knowing what to expect just threw us over the cliff. We didn't know what to do. We didn't know what was wrong with us. We didn't know if somebody had told us, hey, it's normal, and the worst of it will last a year or two. We would have said, fine, good, we're down with that. I mean, women can have babies, we can do this. But to not know was probably the worst thing possible for us, and basically started the impetus of our goddess group meetings.
Lynette, I love the notion of the slumber party with a purpose. Women need women, and the notion that you all took this time and then maintained it over the course of 14 years, and then now have pulled it into something like the blog and so forth, and your own writings, is just really remarkable. What are some of kind of the unique remedies or a remedy you'd care to share?
If I were to give one remedy, and absolutely one, it would be to create your own goddess group and call it whatever you want. And, sometimes when you're in the throes of menopause, it's like, oh, I can't possibly do that. It's too much work. It's this and that. Well, we've done all the work for everybody. If somebody went to our Menopause Goddess blog and wrote in creating your own goddess group in the search box, it would come up with all the ways of how to do that and how easy it is. And so no reinventing the wheel. All you'd have to do is invite people, and it would be simple. And but if there was one remedy that we would say all of us got us through, instead of just surviving menopause, we actually became able to thrive during the transition, it was each other. It was that group. Single most important, every woman said, the single most important remedy they had in their multiple remedies and things that they tried, that one saved their bacon.
That's wonderful. It's that whole notion of a tribe and finding it at the point of life that you're in, that truly makes it so much more special. Tell us a little bit about the blog then. How did that group in its very infancy shape the blog? What kind of information and resources do you make available?
First, about how it got started was my girlfriend Teresa, she said, oh, not only will we start this group, we'll write a book about it because there's no information out there. And I was like, you write a book. I wrote in a book once. It was a lot of work. It was hard. I said I'd never do it again. I'll never do it again. The things that were shared were so wonderful and so helpful that we couldn't help but share it. I asked my book agent, because I'd heard some authors started blogs. And I was like, well, do you think that's a good idea? She said, I absolutely do. But the blog took on a life of its own, oddly enough. So not all the stuff in the book ever made it on the blog because so much information was coming in so fast and furious that I had more than enough stuff to put on the blog for years. Because it's been around for 15 years, the kinds of information really are partly what women share with each other, but also as a nurse, I am pretty well able to sift through the medical information and pull out and put in plain language what we really need to know. I would say, and have said, in the past couple years, the shift of the blog has been more to what do we do post-menopause to live an exciting and vibrant life. And I would say to women going to the blog, every symptom, everything you want to know about is been written about at least once, probably 5 to 10 times on the blog. And that search box is amazing. Let's say you're experiencing heavy bleeding. You write in heavy bleeding, bang, all the blog posts dealing with that show up. And so any symptom that someone is experiencing, you can find remedies, you can find information, you can find it on the blog because it's been around so long, really. That longevity meant that we've gathered all that information, and that's why the blog has shifted its focus now. So the more recent entries are much more about living our second act. Of course, if there's a new product like yours, I'll showcase that if I think it's worthwhile. I'll showcase books if I think they're worthwhile, and I'll report on research or new modalities. But otherwise, it's all there for the asking and the taking.
It's wonderful. How has managing the blog changed the way you deal with your own life changes? Obviously associated with menopause, but this next chapter, as you talk about it, has the blog made you more conscientious, or what would you attribute to the blog that's changed the way that you're moving through this as a woman yourself?
I absolutely think that the meetings and the blog have made me more open and conscientious, and probably had us ask questions we would never have asked ourselves. And I think that was really important. Knowing that every woman has a different menopause, and that what works for one woman won't for another, or what worked today won't work for me tomorrow, which is startling but true. And so you become much more fluid, much more open and receptive, rather than trying to control everything, if that makes any sense.
What would you recommend are some of the lifestyle changes that help with the transition into menopause, and also into this second chapter of life?
I think the lifestyle changes for the second chapter are pretty simple. There's a nurse who's also a hospital administrator I know, and she summed it up pretty sweet and simple. She said, it's eat well, move, and love well. And if you do that, you're gonna do great. And I think that really is the prescription. That said, when you're first going through menopause, it's rough. Different foods, different temperature foods, things like that can precipitate horrible hot flashes. Women will find themselves trying anything. There is a lot of writing out there that says, oh, you shouldn't have chocolate, you shouldn't have alcohol, you shouldn't have wine. All of those precipitate hot flashes. And I basically wrote in the book that I would give up my healthcare practitioner before I would give up wine and chocolate and coffee. And one of the doctors who proofread my book said, absolutely best part of the book as far as he was concerned. So what that really translates to is you have to be gentle with yourself. If you make changes, or when you make changes, don't change everything all at once. You're already going through so much. So if you're having horrible hot flashes, you might try cutting out caffeine or decreasing it. Same thing with chocolate, same thing with wine. But if those are things that also make you feel happier, then I wouldn't do it, or I wouldn't do it too quickly. All of us, when we first started meeting, the refrigerator for the weekend, honest to God, was so stuffed with wine, chocolate, and we had coffee, and we had a wonderful time. And over the years, we gradually, now if you look in the fridge, there might be 1 or 2 bottles and we don't drink it very much. And we don't feel the need for so much chocolate. Probably our serotonin levels are up again. But we all agreed that, you know what, there's only so much you can give up and so much you can do for yourself. And secondarily, I wouldn't, if you haven't been super heavy duty in exercise, then I wouldn't say, okay, now I'm going to do 6 days of Pilates. Again, be gentle, be kind to yourself more than you've ever been because you really need it at this time of life. So don't say, well, I'll fix this, because it doesn't get fixed. It's actually something we have to actually go through, but we can choose how we go through it. And we can say, oh, I've known so many women say, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start eating this way and I'm going to start exercising this way. And I think that's great if you feel nourished by that. If you don't, if you feel deprived, now is not the time to feel deprived.
In all of that, have you come across any surprises or anything surprise you along the way that, like, whoa, I haven't heard that symptom?
Oh, absolutely. The weirdest one was actually the first year of the blog. A woman wrote me. She had burning lip syndrome, also can be called burning mouth syndrome. And I swear I had never heard about that. And her doctors had said that she needed to take some heavy duty drugs that were like anticonvulsants and had huge side effects to deal with. And it was so painful for her that her mouth just burned all the time, made it hard to eat. So I made it my personal mission to learn what I could about burning lip syndrome, and I found that, weirdly enough, there was a way to deal with it that was a more natural thing that worked probably better than the big drugs, and it was simply oil that had cayenne pepper in it. It's like you control the burn with a burn, and it makes it stop. And so I was able to find that, and it was eye-opening, and I went, oh my God, there are symptoms that I have never even dreamed of that occur with menopause. So that was shocking to me. It was surprising to me how many women came down with, who previously healthy, strong, active women, came down with some kind of serious illness or illnesses during the menopause transition. Now, it's not too surprising that your immune system might be affected, but I mean, hideously affected. Like, I got my first attack of shingles, went online to see what it said about it, and it was like, well, either you have lymphoma or there's something very wrong with you. And now it doesn't say that. Now enough of us, of the baby boomers, have had shingles that now it says, hey, shingles is probably going to happen for the first time when you're menopausal because it's from the chickenpox virus, which continues to live in your system. But you can imagine how terrified I was when I read, oh, great, I have a lymphoma.
That's one thing you really don't hear about, with associated with menopause at all, is around that notion of more serious illnesses outside of the traditional symptoms.
Well, absolutely. And I even wrote to the investigators at the Nurses' Health Study, which is the longest proactive health study that's ever been done. And I'm part of it. It started, I think, the year before I was in nursing school. And they said that was really interesting that they were actually just studying like rheumatoid arthritis as a group and lupus as a group, but they hadn't really considered that this might be because there's an immune system assault that happens with menopause. Now, have they done anything with it? Not that I know of, but I'm still hopeful that there will be research done. Even if research isn't done, I would say if you're coming up on perimenopausal age, if you're 40 or early 40s, now's the time to start boosting up your immune system as much as you can.
You've listed off a few kind of really odd things with menopause as well. It was some of the typical things, but Lynette, what are the 5 forgotten symptoms of menopause?
Well, I just mentioned one of them, which is the immune dysfunction, which is just horrifying and horrible. And fully half of our group had some huge health problem when they'd never had any health problems their whole life, pretty much, except for normal colds and flus. And each one had a different assault, which is, I think, why it's not noticed as much. Secondly, the hair loss is getting a little more play now, but most of us women define ourselves a little bit as feminine by our hair. And if your hair is falling out in big clumps and suddenly, it's a real concern. I found this the most disconcerting symptom of all, actually, is that thank God I had a lot of hair, because I believe I lost fully a third of my hair volume. And I was ready to research hats and wigs and all kinds of things. And then it stopped. And I'll tell you, if you go to your dermatologist or to your hairdresser, they'll go, oh, well, it's just hormonal. That really doesn't help. It's horrifying. So I think that one is not given as much credence as it should. But that's changing, thankfully. Brain fog is another one. Oh, my goodness. You know, the fact that suddenly your brain doesn't work at all. You can't remember things. You can't focus or concentrate. One woman wrote me and said, oh my God, I'm studying for my master's degree. I started to write my thesis. Menopause came on, and I'm afraid I'll never finish it. I just can't seem to think. And so if you think about when you have the flu and your head's all full and you can't think and, you know, you're just kind of out of it, it's like that, only every day. So it's really feels like we're losing our minds. And so to tell somebody, no, you don't have Alzheimer's, no, you're not going crazy, what's happening is normal, it kind of sucks, but it does get better with time. And so but it can be a horrifying symptom too. And, you know, most menopausal women that I know laugh it off now, but it is really difficult to deal with. Fatigue is never addressed, I don't think. And there can be almost a bone-crushing fatigue that happens with menopause. Just because everything hormonally is in such flux. And so you can just feel like you have no energy whatsoever. So just the time when you think you ought to be exercising, you can barely drag yourself through the day. It's exhausting. And certainly, you know, insomnia plays a part in that. But even if you're sleeping well, and I did sleep well after a while, the fatigue would just come out of nowhere and just didn't want to do anything, didn't want to move. So again, it was like having the flu all the time. And the fifth symptom I mention is anxiety. People who've never been anxious their whole lives suddenly have panic attacks, wake up in the middle of the night just worried about everything, worried about just everyday things, a constant barrage of worries. And it's pretty debilitating also. And they don't talk about it much, or, you know, there aren't a lot of remedies you can really use without pretty major side effects. Now, obviously, if it's making it so you can't go outside the house, then that needs treatment. But if it's just, you know, feelings of doom and gloom and lots of worries and anxiety and panic attacks and things, that can be managed with just, this is normal. It's going to go away and get better. I'm going to give myself a reality check. What is happening in this moment? The sky is not falling. Nothing has happened. Everything is okay in this moment. And to breathe into that can sometimes break the pattern of that. And just knowing it's normal, honestly, is such a huge relief to women. When they write me and go, I think I'm going out of my mind, I'm scared of everything, I'm nervous, and I write back and say, it's totally normal, they go, oh my God, thank you, and it's not going to last forever? Fabulous, I can deal.
Hope and encouragement are obviously the good things. I was going to ask you, on the flip side, are there any uniquely good things that start to happen as we move into the menopause phase of life?
Oh, that's a very good question. And yes, there are. I mean, after the initial physical and sometimes emotional onslaught, you kind of come out the other side feeling like, okay, I'm different now. And if I'm different, how is that going to play out in my life? And oddly enough, we all decided that we cared less what people thought in the best possible way, in that it's like, menopausal women become extremely creative. And that creative urge is overwhelming. You can't wait to create, whether it's craft or dance or painting or writing or gardening. That creative urge is huge. It's like we channel that fertility into a different kind of fertility. And also a sort of a willingness to try anything, because I feel like we've been through the worst of it. Now it's like a new life in a sense. And so in that new life, you're not afraid to try new things because, you didn't do it good enough, police won't come and get you. You can fail at something and laugh and then try something else. You can enjoy things more. There's a settling into your body that happens because I think it's like an awakening. Menopause is such a sharp transition. I feel sorry for men. They don't get to go through it because that sharp change causes you to question everything, and you begin to go, oh, I see what I want to do with life. I see how I want to live it. I see how I want to enjoy it and how full and rich it can be. So actually, menopause turns out to be a wonderful thing. I always say menopause will set you free, but it'll really piss you off first.
That's fantastic. I love that. We typically don't, look at the positive, and we tend to say here around Geneva, oftentimes, we celebrate these other milestones in our lives as women, like, when we got our first period or when we had our first baby, if we've had babies, but we don't really celebrate menopause other than, women will say, I look forward to not having a period. Well, that's such a small bit within the bigger new next chapter that you just really talked through from a positivity perspective. And how inspiring is that? I think that's great. What's made the blog so popular amongst your readers?
I think it's just the plain talk. I think it's two things, the plain talk and the fact that I can sift through the medical information and make it plain and simple. But I think that the straight talk from real women, and it's not just me, but all these women, we sort of distilled the wisdom and put it out there. I think that's what's really made it popular, is that trying to demystify things, make things simple and clean and pure, and not be afraid to say things. There's some bloggers who, there's many more menopause blogs now, but some bloggers who are, afraid of litigation or this and that. Listen, we're just women sharing wisdom, and we're not going to hold back, and we're not going to say we know. We're just going to share it. And what works for one woman won't work for another, but we are there as a broader community of women, I think, helping each other.
That's fantastic. I'm just so excited at what you've done. We say it over and over, but our mission at Geneva is to help women feel fabulous in their bodies, no matter their age. What kind of lasting advice would you give to our listeners about how they can take control of this phase of their lives and ultimately just feel as fabulous as they possibly can?
I can't say strongly enough how important it is to have a group of like-afflicted, like-minded women. That said, I think just being responsive to your body and to yourself. Again, you're going to want to exercise and eat well, but you're also going to want to be gentle with yourself. I always think of menopause as puberty to the 10th power. And, when kids are going through puberty, we give them lots of space. We understand their moods, and we let them go into their room and be quiet and write poetry. Alas, that isn't usually what happens for the menopausal woman, who has to continue to work and take care of a family and do all those things, and is feeling all those feelings only to the 10th power. I think making space for yourself and being proactive and saying, I really need this. This is how I need to take care of myself. And involving, family members in that and friends. I think what happens, a lot of men read the blog with their wives because, if we have no idea what's going on, it's even worse for them. It's like their spouse is suddenly, or their partner is suddenly turned into somebody they don't know. And so for them to experience it and be a helpmate along the way is so healing for both partners, honestly. And So I think that those are the kinds of things. Be gentle with yourself, but gradually incorporate more exercise, eating well. But if you're suffering from brain fog and a whole bunch of things, be good to yourself. Take time out for yourself.
That's great. That's wonderful. I think especially about involving the men or partners in your lives that are trying to come along the same journey. I think that's really critical. Yeah, Lynette, in a final note, can you share with our audience on how to find more of the resources that you offer? You've obviously published a book, Becoming a Menopause Goddess, and you also, continue to build and nourish the Menopause Goddess blog. But can you just kind of give our listeners access to where they can find your resources, and if there's any I've left off the list?
I think that it's easy to find the blog. It's menopausegoddessblog.com or .org. And secondarily, finding the book, Becoming a Menopause Goddess, it's on Amazon, it's on all the ebook sites, Barnes & Noble, you name it, it's all there. If you're on the blog, you can just click on the stuff about the book and it will take you there. It's a culmination of wisdom. Are we going to do another one? I kind of don't think so, because right now we're focusing more on putting out the information about our second act on the blog. But just put what you're interested in the search box, or contact us. We're more than happy to talk to anybody and just give us a little time to get back to you.
That's great. And I can vouch for the fact that you do respond because you've been so responsive to us. So thank you, Lynette, and thanks to your whole community that's obviously gotten you to this point. And we, again, appreciate your time today and sharing your knowledge with the audience and with the Genevers out there listening. And we certainly hope to bring you back at some point in the future. I think we've teed off all sorts of deeper dive topics from this conversation that we could go into, and we'd love to have you back.
It would be my pleasure, and thank you guys for all that you're doing to help menopausal women. It's just so heartening that there are more resources out there now, and like I said, I'm happy to let people know about those resources, because all of it's going to make our transition easier.
Thanks for listening to the G-Spot. We welcome your feedback at geneve.com. That's GENNEVE.com. You can follow us on Facebook, where you will see more on show notes, and subscribe to us on iTunes, and you'll never miss an episode. The G-Spot is produced by Shannon Perry. Theme music by Smitty. And from all of us at Geneve, think happy, healthy vaginas.